reality is no longer determined by what everyone hears, what is told, what's whispered or announced in an oral form. It's now the authority of text, and a democratized text, and totally shatters this sort of medieval world of concentric circles all around the church, in which everyone is in chorus, sort of. It's like the sort of vision of God you get in the Empyrean at the end of the Divine Comedy, where everyone's kind of in order around this center. It's gone. There is no center. There's only text, and everyone is their own center. That's sort of the Lutheran idea of direct communion with God, right? Is that you no longer need an intermediary, and you don't need to fit into these concentric circles. You have a direct line. It's much more linear. Whatever is printed takes on its own reality in print. A rumor doesn't need to survive by being whispered ear to ear. It claims its own eternity once it's published. Once it's published, it takes on its own reality, even as a rumor. It exists regardless of any connection to reality beyond just its own text, right? Like the Rosicrucians themselves, the print form creates a virtual reality in the imagination of readers, and this hallucination can become real in a way when people act as if it is real. It's not something that can be corrected by simply printing a retraction. This is sort of even the kind of funny thing we see still today with the disclaimers, like this article disclaiming that something in here was hacked, or this is a Russian disinformation, or this doesn't accord with the WHO, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't really matter. Like the memes will pass even with this sort of retraction. They take on their own virtual reality just by being seen by enough people. So we might call this state for ourselves like postmodernism, or we'll talk about Baudrillard and the simulacra of the real and hyper reality. But here's Ben Jonson. He's a nimble fellow, and alike skilled in every liberal science, as having a certain snaps of all, a neat quick vein in forging news too. I do love him, and promised him a good turn, and I would do it. What's your price? The value.
I'm going to be real with you guys. This episode was initially supposed to be a pretty simple introduction to the time period of the early 17th century, late 16th century, the dawn of modernity, the early modern period, however you want to put it, the Elizabethan age into the Jacobean age, the time of Elizabeth of Bohemia, Frederick, the Elector of Palatine, and the chemical wedding, the prospective Spanish match to bring peace to Europe during the height of the Reformation. But as it so often happens, I fell into a very deep wormhole leading me back to the dawn of time, the ziggurats of ancient Babylon, Celtic mercenaries working for Akhenaten, the usual sort of stuff. I mean, it's not that any of this is irrelevant, because it's extremely relevant to understanding the way people thought of themselves in this time period, which is very far removed from our own self-conceptions when this our concept of nationalism, of a nation state, these sorts of things are totally alien and, in fact, kind of produced by these conditions in early modernity. But at the time, the way you actually justified power was through reference to a historical continuity, to a hereditary aristocracy, going back to Troy or to Egypt or to the Bible. In my opinion, this is a little bit more reasonable than the way that we conceive of the world, considering the lindiness, the stability of hereditary aristocracy in time. I mean, this is, I'm now months into just looking up people's last names and finding out whether they're in the peerage or not, if they have a vocational surname, if they're a banking family, if their family members have been inducted into any orders or secret societies. Have they won any awards? They've been knighted by the queen. All of this stuff still happens, and it's hard for us to forget. I mean, it's easy for us to forget that in America, considering we tend to conceive of ourselves as a new genesis for the world, in which this entire world that we're looking at here no longer exists or bears any relevance onto the facts of the matter. There's not supposed to be a hereditary aristocracy in America. It's not supposed to exist. But here we are with Joseph Robinette Biden, whose family comes from a long line of East Indiamen, the Knights of Rockefeller, the Aramco boys. Nothing's really changed from this time. So I think that this is part of the process of trying to understand our own position will entail having to understand a time period like this about 500 years ago, because in the grand scheme of time, 500 years ago is not very long ago at all, and not really that much has changed from 500 years ago. There seems to be a lot of changes, and there are substantial ones in technology, but the way the average person, I think, understands themselves is to this day still in the Ptolemaic cosmos. This is why the popularity of flat Earth is so appealing, and why it is also lindy and stable, is because it refers to a real sort of phenomenological reality that when we are out in the world, we do act as if the world is an infinite plane, a flat plane which the sun revolves around. And this is just evident from our senses. This is what's particularly interesting about some criticisms of modernity as being extremely sensual or based in senses and epistemologically based in senses, as like Lockean epistemology is, or something like that. But it really isn't. It's actually the exact opposite. The modern is the alien to us. It is still the alien to us. It always must be so, because we are not born in the Kepler universe. We learn to exist within the Copernican, the Keplerian universe, but it is not the world that we inhabit in our imaginations, I believe. I don't believe that we truly imagine ourselves on a epic space rock, as people are wont to say. What we do live in is pretty similar to what the average peasant lived in under feudalism. In fact, these days, I don't really believe that feudalism ever ended. We're talking about a return to feudalism, but perhaps we should be asking if feudalism ever ended at all. I mean, if we look at this is me becoming the protagonist of the novels we're reading, in that I have become the paranoid protagonist, and I am delving into all of this stuff, and I am trying to build this cosmology in my head to make sense of it, like Oedipus Mas and The Crying of Lot 49, or the protagonist of our Egypt Chronicle that we shall eventually be getting to, I swear. One thing I've been keeping in mind is this quote that Salvatore Tarnmore sent me on Twitter quite a long time ago, which is how I just store it in my memory for when I want to find it again. But it's Gene Wolfe. It's from a Gene Wolfe interview, and we'll get to some Gene Wolfe in this show for sure. I'm a big Gene Wolfe stan. R.I.P. the man, the Pringles man. But this is he sort of looked at it similarly. Here's a quote from him. He said, "I was telling my wife what the origin of the word freelance is. A freelance is a medieval knight who has no feudal obligations and could hire himself out. It's essentially a mercenary. He hired his lance, and then if you hired him, you had one more lance in your cavalry. But now someone's called a freelance in the same sort of way for contract work, right? So Gene Wolfe, for instance, worked for Tor Books. Tor Books is owned by St. Martin's Press. St. Martin's Press is owned by British Macmillan Corporation, which is owned by the Macmillan family and headed up by the chosen patriarch or matriarch these days of the Macmillan family. So in this sense, to be a freelance is to just be a knight, a mercenary,
That's what contract work is. It's always been mercenary work. And to be in a union is simply to be in a guild. These structures didn't disappear, they just changed in time. This is part of what gets me when people misunderstand what Kazhev meant about the end of history. It's not that history ever really changes things that much. Ultimately, it does change, but what changes is just juridical categorizations. So what the difference between our feudalism is and the feudalism of old is that you have more legal rights. You can hire a lawyer. You actually are given a lawyer if you cannot afford one yourself. You have the same, ostensibly, you have the same legal system at your disposal as anyone else, and you're treated juridicially the same as anyone else. This wasn't the case in earlier legal systems. Slaves, for instance, were often treated like invalids or animals. They were not considered legal persons. And that's really what slavery is that aspect is lacking legal personhood, which seems to be lost these days when people discuss wage slavery or think of feudalism as being based in red-pilled as opposed to our current system. It's usually just a sort of naivety, a kind of historical ignorance applied to what are fundamentally romantic descriptions of the medieval world that were created in the middle of modernity, which is the world that people imagine now as being the medieval. But it's very, very far from the case. I mean, the medieval world is very complicated. The medieval world has the beginnings of stock exchanges, credit systems, assets, speculation, banking. All of these sorts of things already exist. When we think about something like the Knights Templar, even the Knights Templar are a remnant of much older Roman guilds, mercenary corporations. These go way back to Phoenicia. Ulysses, Odysseus was himself, I believe, most likely, to be a Phoenician mercenary. His the Odyssey really is based on Phoenician sailing epics, which we don't have much of. We only have basically fragments of them as quoted and other sources that stuck around longer through the destruction of Punic history. But this is where I've gotten lost in myself, is I've been tracing these lines back and forth just so that I can explain something like the chemical wedding. Because what's difficult here is what's difficult still when we talk about conspiracy culture, or if we were to call conspiracy theories a sort of countercultural world, that this sort of conspiracy theory counterculture, which derives from things like the Church of the Subgenius or the Discordians in America primarily, and ultimately from, Robert Anton Wilson being the editor of Playboy at the time when they were doing this. I believe Adam Curtis covers this in his new film. If you want to check out some of that, I don't necessarily agree with his conclusions entirely, but there's a lot there. There's a lot of weird shit going on in the 60s where the sort of hysteria around the realization that we still live in a feudal world with the assassination of the king of John F. Kennedy, who is himself in the bloodline of the kings of Ormond. So this is very Lindy stuff, guys. I'm saying 1,000 years ago, JFK would have been a king, and 1,000 years later, he was still. This isn't genetic, I suppose, but even more than genetic, it's the rigidity of the class system, or the stability rather, because part of the continuity of genes is, assortment in social classes. You recreate your social class by procreating with people from your social class. It's pretty simple stuff, like aristocrats marry aristocrats. Their kids are aristocrats who marry aristocrats. The time periods where you see a kind of change in the guard are mostly time periods in which the hereditary aristocracy needs new blood in new fields that they haven't necessarily dominated yet. So they marry him in. this is also the sort of confusion that arises with, I guess, the internet anti-Semites, which have become very kind of more like the normative thing on the right, which wasn't the case a couple of years ago. But I guess this meme has spread very quickly because it's a heuristic that's a lot less complicated than understanding that the Jewish hereditary aristocracy and the British hereditary aristocracy are part of the same hereditary aristocracy. And in fact, they often claimed, especially in the Victorian age, to this bloodline going back into antiquity, that the British, the Celts, were a lost tribe of Israel. And I'm not saying this is entirely true, but I'm not saying that there isn't something to that. There is an odd part of it which rings eerily true. Like, why is it the case that this happened? It's interesting. It's very interesting. But ultimately, all it is just the continuity of the same. I mean, how do you become a noble? You get money and you marry into the nobility. That's the realist power. Even money power is nothing compared to bloodlines, networks, social capital, they say now. But this has always been the case. You can be extremely rich, but the purpose of acquiring a lot of wealth is in order to buy your way into the lower rungs of real power. Because in this sort of world, money is kind of below consideration. The proper aristocracy, like these are people who have been bred for generations to know nothing about how money works or to care. They hire people to do that for them. What they are, enlightened, the progressives, the vanguard party of the cosmos. This is Bill Gates organizing global summits for inclusive capitalism. And what I think is important is to try to create your historical imagination in such a way that you can explain events from 500 years ago in ways that don't seem too alien from events happening now. For instance, if we take the Rosicrucian manifestos, this strikes me particularly closely, having been on the front lines of the meme war about 6 years ago now, I guess, is that the creation of a massive hoax derives its power from the fear of a secret society of sorts. In this case, I'm just remembering, I shall not name the people responsible for the Daily Beast article about turning Pepe into a Nazi, but in my mind, this is really not too far from the way the Rosicrucian manifestos functioned, in that this joke got taken out of context just because of the quality of print. The quality of print and the quality of electric media means that everything just bounces around and is overheard. Everything's whispers, rumors, and people. It's like when you're in a room and people are whispering and you sort of think you hear people saying certain things, but you can't ever be sure. That's a lot of what it's like in the press world, is if you're inundated with enough of this, you start to see patterns where they might not necessarily exist. Although they might also exist is the problem here. That's also my main problem with the sort of counterculture conspiracy theory world, is that it's kind of LARPy and fun. It's meant to not be taken seriously. It kind of takes the historical investigation of things like secret societies, the Freemasons, or the mythos of the hereditary aristocracy, their bloodline obsessions, these sorts of revisionist histories or theories of cover-ups. All of those things are absolutely real, and they're still with us. We're not trained to think of the world in this way or to talk about it in this way, but that's sort of the bind of liberalism. The bind of liberalism is that we are supposed to not pay attention to the invisible hands of the market. And in the time of Elizabeth, the invisible hands of the market, we might name the major banking families. There are of course the Medicis and the Venetian banking family, but even they are kind of at the end of their viability by the time of Queen Elizabeth. They've already had their great days as popes. But the rising class was the Fuggers, which is still the funniest name, these motherfuckers. They were behind the Habsburgs. They married into the Habsburg family, one of the probably the most powerful noble line of the time, and they financed the Habsburgs. They were all over the place. That's Habsburg Spain, and if you look at the maps from the early 1600s, late 1500s, you'll see what I mean. It doesn't look like our maps. It looks a lot more like if you look up a map right now of cable coverage in America, it looks a little bit more like that, where there's non-contiguous spaces that are just these lines created by backroom deals, not the sort of lines that exist in our states where there's a river there or it's on one of the meridians. And this was argued in some local court. And what you see in England is a country that can go in many different ways back then. Henry VIII is kind of misunderstood, I think. Henry VIII is kind of based, in my opinion. Henry VIII was kind of cool. He wrote music and poetry, and he was kind of a sad boy. He thought he was cursed by God. That's why he wasn't having sons, and he was trying to be a good Catholic for a while. But what he realized, what a lot of people, I guess, were realizing at the same time, is that the Catholic Church was a political organization, and it was a corrupt political organization that was run by very few people. With the rise of the counter papacies throughout the Middle Ages, where you had like the Avignon papacy and things like this, and with the various plagues sweeping the country, there was less and less people converging at the Vatican to do UN World Summit of Catholicism. So what you had, like a kind of permanent papal nobility who were vastly overrepresented, we might say. The Italians were vastly overrepresented in this constituency compared to the rest of Christendom. And obviously, people started to realize that. For instance, you have Henry VIII, who's married to a Habsburg, and then he realizes that this is a pretty bad deal for him geopolitically, that he's going to be the minor partner, the junior partner in this, and that his sovereignty over his own country is kind of in name only. He's kind of like if you had a Burger King franchise owner who went rogue and just started redecorating the place, called himself the Burger King. I kind of like that. There's a part I have a sympathy towards this sort of anti-globalist, I guess you could say, this sort of yearning for escape or towards asymmetry in relations. But at the same time, under Henry VIII, you have the Hanseatic League. And the Hanseatic League is a series of merchant banks and mercers and trading ports going from London, Amsterdam to Norway, Denmark, Sweden. And this was a very powerful business interest as well. And it was a business interest that seemed to sway Lutheran generally. And Lutheranism is not really the type of Protestantism that became popular in England. In England, they'd been having, internal discord amongst the churchgoers for quite some time. There's a long, long history of peasant revolts going back to like the year 1000. And even this history is kind of covered in the Rosicrucian Manifestos and in the works of someone like Shakespeare. This is akin to if we alternated between AOC and Donald Trump as president back and forth in like one generation, where you have Henry VIII, dissolving the monasteries, BTFOing the papists, and then when he's out, you get Mary and she puts it back in, and then you have all the Protestants fleeing. And part of the Marian exile community was the creation of what would become the quote unquote Rosicrucian community. This is exactly when Francis Walsingham took his leave from England to go study at the University of Padua. And the University of Padua was kind of the center of Renaissance humanism in both its Catholic and Protestant forms. It's kind of a milieu that straddles the line between them, which is also why you see people taking Shakespeare as a recusant Catholic and these sorts of things. It's not quite that simple. It's not quite that simple at all, because the Renaissance humanism view was really one that was beyond caring so much about doctrinal differences, and it was more looking for some sort of identity beyond the warring churches. This is where ultimately our conception of the nation state will come from, is from this Renaissance humanism world and the rise of classical republicanism. But if you want to think of this as some sort of leftward Cthulhu swimming, then you're going to end up discounting all of the greatest writers and thinkers, all of the things that we truly appreciate in the West. Because someone like Dante was not a conservative. He was not a royalist of his own time. He was considered a revolutionary, and he was. He was against the temporal power of the Pope. He believes in the separation of church and state. And you can read all of this in De Monarchia, which no one reads anymore, but I recommend it. It's great. And this conception of the separation of church and state gets hampered by Henry VIII, who creates a new state church, the Anglican Church. And the Anglicans are kind of like, they're like the Biden supporters of all of this. No one really likes them. No, there's not that many people who are devout Anglicans. Anglicans are kind of, they're smart for choosing the state church because it affords you a lot of power in the system. But doctrinally, it's almost indefensible. So you might as well pick one side. You should be a Catholic or a Puritan. We hate centrists, but this is the origin of centrism, is the Anglican Church, the middle road between the two, which did not sail too well either, considering the English Civil War that will come later. And we'll probably have to cover all of this British history at some point. I could go on, but all of this is so fascinating, and it's so important to understanding the roots of America and where we find ourselves in now. Like, where did all of this come from? As I said, we have this odd belief that the world restarted with America, and that it was an exit from history, from the historical as it was considered, and we developed a new conception of the historical, which I guess people would call Whig history. But it's again more complicated than that, because there are elements of progress in the world, like as I said earlier, with the change in juridical practice, but it's not the same as the Whig historians will make it out to be, because the Whig historians really kind of hold on to some elements of the Renaissance utopianism, of the Christian utopia, of the creation of the singularity, right? Like, this is a theogony, this is theosis for the secular world. And again, this all derives from aspects of this Renaissance humanism. But the Renaissance humanists, I must say, I find the most compelling. It is hard for me to really empathize with a ultramontanist Catholic or a Digger, one of the kind of radical Puritan sects who, believe that the world was very much ending and very much soon. The fifth monarchists, they were called in some cases as well, because they believed that the fifth monarchy of Jesus was imminent. I can understand these people, and we even see them still on Twitter today. It's not much has really changed. You can still find the return to tradition Catholicism and the QAnon levelers, but the people that I've always liked through almost all of history have been the encyclopedists, the anatomists of the world, the people trying to preserve and dissect the corpse of the world, if that makes sense. It's a little morbid, I suppose, but I'm a little morbid. And so is the sort of humor that derives from the encyclopedic or the anatomical mind. It is often disliked. I think it is very much repressed today, considering our general aversion to satire, because this is what satire truly is to create an encyclopedia of your times and to put it on stage to, reflect nature back to itself, the nature of the times to the people. What people like more is the romantic, which is to reflect the desires of the people back to them. And this is why Shakespeare is so great where others are not. It's because Shakespeare, as a later writer would put it, risked the censure of the elites in praising the public, while later upwardly mobile Horatio Alger romantic industrial writers, they have no interest in reflecting the world as it is. They want to incarnate themselves, their rise as being the natural world, the hustler. Even these are old as hell, This is Thomas Nash. Thomas Nash and Ben Jonson were shitposters, and they were treated as such. They got into quite a bit of trouble for their shitposts. Thomas Nash had a law passed specifically to stop him from publishing things in 1599 after the marble plate controversy, where he was essentially trolling some fuddy-duddy Puritans who believed that poetry could only be written according to classical Latin grammar, while he was, of course, on the euphuist side of bombastic new language and invention. Ben Jonson and Thomas Nash, again, also were imprisoned for their play, The Isle of Dogs, which we still do not have a copy of. And, that's a real shame. It's I've been feeling the shame of that more and more recently as I can't find it. And I've been binging some Ben Jonson and Thomas Nash especially. Thomas Nash was a real literary hustler. He was a real shitposter. Pierce Penniless is the first story I can think of the NEET as a person, the overeducated college dropout who has to make his money publishing, controversial journalism. This is we have a lot of those today. I might even myself be a part of this class. But it's a tradition that goes way, way back. And this is the tradition I think we're going to be looking at the most in this podcast. That will entail probably reading Lucian and Menipus and Aristophanes, all of these sorts of satirical writers, because I believe, again, that this is, the most interesting stuff. I think ultimately, if you're going to talk about like a Marxist class and analysis and these sorts of things, what you're really talking about is an anatomy of society. You're trying to create an anatomy of it, and the way humans work is if you show the truth to them, you reflect a mirror at them, it petrifies them. This is an old Greek myth, right? So it's not about being a class dogmatist or a race dogmatist. It's about making an anatomy of a society and of peoples through time and trying to expose the ostentations, the ideology of these classes compared to their material function. That's what you could say is a Marxist materialism or dialectical materialism. That's the fundamentals, is that you're just juxtaposing the rhetoric with the ends, the means and the description of the means. That's all it is. That's what satire is. It's pretty simple, It's kind of funny where we can complicate literature, but ultimately it becomes very simple in this sort of analysis. The anatomist is just preserving the corpse of his present moment, dissecting it, ordering it, labeling it, explaining how it works, what things are connected to where, etc. That's it. It's pretty simple. That's what I want to do. That's what we all want to do here, right? Is we're trying to put together the world because it doesn't seem to be together anymore. It's all over the place. There's many worlds. Is that Nietzsche, the many worlds hypothesis, right? The multiverse. of Reddit. I think this is very far from the Bruno's conception of the multiverse as well. Bruno's conception was not one in which the world becomes arbitrary in its ties to a multiplicity of worlds, but that each world is the center of itself and that they never interact with each other. So that's not quite what we have. What we have is, in the popular ideology, even the rightists will say that reality is fundamentally whatever you think about it. There is no unified material reality or history that we could ever know or describe. There are only lies, and the lies we tell ourselves. And the lies we tell ourselves, if they're strong enough and we are strong enough, become true. That's the idea. That's mindset. Hashtag mindset thinking. The power of positive thinking. This is Norman Vincent Peale. This is Donald Trump even. This is what Trump himself believes. This is part of the sort of faith of America. And it derives from this Calvinist sense of anxiety over whether or not you were chosen by God or not. When you get to the mindset, what it means is you are if you believe you are. I believe someone who rushed the Capitol said that he checked with Jesus before doing so, and Jesus said it was okay, and so he did it. So it must be okay. Pretty good stuff. Pretty useful stuff. Pretty good if you're doing shit that's kind of sus. Because who's to say, man? So it goes with the Rosicrucians also. What did they think they were doing? Well, they thought, and they really did think this, they thought that the world accorded to the narrative laid out in the Bible, and that this pattern, what Blake called the Great Code of Art, which is taken by Northrop Frye in the book The Great Code, which I would recommend, that this process, the cyclical rise and fall of the temple in Jerusalem until the finality of Jesus and the destruction of the temple disappearing, the temple then being understood in a new spiritual sense, that this cyclical structure of time is reasonable, that it is rational, that it's the logos of history. This is where Hegel gets it from. I mean, nothing comes from nowhere. Hegel, big fan of Shakespeare. Hegel reading Behmen, reading a bunch of these Protestant mystics. Swedenborg, these sorts of people. Swedenborg reading Paracelsus. Paracelsus reading Trithemius. This is the dream of the historian, is fundamentally to understand history as a meta structure, so then you can be outside of it and then you can look at it objectively, as opposed to being in it and involved and then only having a perspective from within its own development. The dream of the historian ultimately, like most romantic artists, is to acquire this sort of theosis, and the singularity is an ersatz expression of this, because the real expression of it is to feel at home in the world as if it is something that you created. The only way for you to feel that way is to understand what it is and how it got here. To be at home somewhere is to know where things are, to know what's where, what drawer has what in it. And the alienation we find in our modern condition is that we don't know any of these things. Like, we don't know where to find the power, the authorities. Where does it reside? We look at there's cabinets in the black cabinets, and we get no accounting of what goes on in here, aside from, receipts dropped on the street, which people then pick up and interpret and send back and forth to each other. But this wasn't always the case. There were times, for the majority of human history, where people felt quite at home in the world, especially in the Ptolemaic world, where there's kind of a timeless sense of time, the eternal return of the same, as Nietzsche called it, I believe. Whereas what we have in our sense is in linear time, the unboundedness of space, the chaos of the cosmos, of epic space rocks floating around explosions. It's why people feel a profound alienation when they go to the planetarium. And part of this is because the outside world the world above and the world below, no longer have a mediator. They no longer have the hermetic mediation of the ratios, the proportions of the above to the below. There is only the below today. There is only atoms in space, bits of data in the stream. And it's hard to feel at home with this unless you can connect it to the Ptolemaic realm, to the true home of the human imagination. And I believe that this is partially why the conspiracy theory counterculture has such a grip, is because people recognize their alienation and from things like the UN or the science of astrology, and it's no longer tamed for them the way that it was in the past, where looking out at the stars, you knew that these all accorded to a divine harmony, a musical harmony, the music of the cosmos of which we played a part. That sort of mythos is gone, mostly. It exists in romance, but as a living belief, it's very weak today. It's a lot stronger is the belief that you can do whatever you want, and so long as you consider yourself a good person, then you are, in fact, a good person, and you've done nothing wrong, and you are valid.
Gay fellow bibliophiles, in love with words, in love with language, in love with books, I feel sure that your heart's going to go out to me too, in what I'm saying.
I think probably American education used to be a little bit better and a little bit more difficult, and children had no choice but to realize that there were certain things that were hard and involved a certain amount of drudgery that were actually very satisfying at the end of it. But for the most part, I think in the U.S., people who've been doing, quote, serious stuff, which is harder and stranger, have always played to a much smaller audience.
It's less people are reading. Like, it feels like almost nobody is reading per capita. What do you make of that? Do you see that as an existential crisis?
No.
What do you make of it?
No. Well, reading for pleasure has always been a minority occupation. Like, most people don't read for pleasure. Of the people who read for pleasure, only a small proportion buy books. Of the people who buy books, only a small proportion buy difficult books. It's a specialty market, and I don't think that's changing. What I do see happening, though, is that is being expanded in surprising ways by such things as YouTube videos and podcasts.
Don't read books. Just don't do it. I read over 120 books last year. Total waste of time. I'm going to explain why in this video, because you guys always ask me, Alex, you're so smarter than I will ever be. You're also a billionaire. You're extremely woke, and you have a great body. And you're family friendly now. I love watching with my kids. In fact, I stopped sending my kids to school because of COVID, and I just have them gather around the television and watch your videos on repeat for 10 hours, which I say is finally good parenting in America. But that being said, when it gets down to reading books, I think they're super unproductive. I don't think they teach you things very well, and I'm going to give you 3 things that are significantly better than books when it comes to growing and educating yourself and overall just being good at what you do, which is primarily going to be entrepreneurship or making more money.
I mean, the Greek idea is that at a certain point in the process of inquiry, you come to rest because you've reached the goal. And the pragmatists are saying, we haven't the slightest idea what it would be like to reach the goal. The idea that the aim of inquiry is, conformity to correspondence to reality, or seeing the face of God, or substituting facts for interpretations, is one that we just can't make any use of. All we really know about is how to exchange justifications of our beliefs and desires with other human beings, and as far as we can see, that will be what human life will be like forever. So, pragmatists regard the Platonist attempt to get away from time into eternity, or get away from conversation into certainty, as a product of an age of human history where life on Earth was so desperate and it seemed so unlikely that life could ever be better that people took refuge in another world. Pragmatism comes along with things like the French Revolution, industrial technology, all the things that made the 19th century believe in progress. When you think that the aim of life is to make things better for our descendants rather than to reach outside of history and time, it alters your sense of what philosophy is good for. In the Platonist and theistic epoch, the point of philosophy was to get you out of this mess into a better place. And
God,
the realm of Platonic ideas, the contemplative life, something like that. And the reaction against this Greek Christian pursuit of blessedness through union with a natural order is to say there isn't any natural order, but there is the possibility of a better life for our great-great-great-grandchildren. That's enough to give you, all the meaning or inspiration or whatever that you could use.
Making more money.
Professor Singer, Hegel is notorious for being difficult to read, for being obscure. He's often described as the most obscure of all the major philosophers. Yet your little book about him has the conspicuous merit of discussing his central ideas in ordinary plain English. I hope you're going to be able to do the same on this program. When you're confronted with the task of expounding Hegel's ideas, where do you find the most convenient place to start?
I start with the philosophy of history, because the history in Hegel is quite concrete. Part of the difficulty with Hegel is that he's so abstract, but the history, because it's concrete, is an easy way in to the more abstract parts of his philosophy.
Well, that in itself is already a new departure in philosophy, isn't it? Because no major philosopher before Hegel regarded history or the philosophy of history as being important.
Yes, it is a departure. Compare it with Kant, for instance. Kant had a view of human nature as human beings eternally divided between their reasoning element and their brute desires. It's a bit like the old picture of man as halfway between the apes and the angels. And for Kant, that was just a fact of human nature. We would always be torn with this division, this conflict. But Hegel said, no, wait a minute, this isn't something immutable. Look at Greek society. Greek society, Hegel said, was more harmonious. People were not conscious of this gulf or division. Their desires were in harmony with their reason. So the point that Kant is talking about, this division, is something that has occurred historically, has developed with the rise of individual conscience in Protestant Europe. And because it's happened historically, it need not be a permanent feature. It could, in some other period, actually again be overcome and a harmony restored.
Hegel looked at all important concepts in this historical way, didn't he? He saw them as being embedded in human life, in ways of life, in societies, and as societies change, so the concepts change. Isn't that right?
Yes, that's absolutely right. He saw that there was development in the way history occurred, that it was always moving forward. It was always a process, never static.
And he had a name for the way in which he moved forward. He called this the dialectical process. Now, can you explain exactly what, in Hegel's mind, the dialectical process was?
Let's go back to the example I mentioned before. Greek society he saw as a harmony, but as a simple harmony. A simple harmony in the sense that people had not developed the alternative notion of individual conscience. There was harmony between the individual and society because individuals hadn't really thought about things themselves. Now, into that simple harmony, there came, in the person, in fact, of Socrates, whom Hegel considers a world historical figure, there came the idea of questioning this harmony. Socrates went around asking people, what is justice? What is virtue? And when they tried to answer, they realized that they'd accepted certain conventions, which Socrates had no trouble in showing could not be sustained. So the simple harmony of Greek society broke down, and because Socrates broke it down, incidentally, Hegel thinks that the Athenians were quite right to condemn Socrates to death. He was genuinely corrupting and subverting Athenian society. But that was an essential part of a historical process, because ultimately, and Hegel fills in the gaps, the steps, but ultimately that led to the rise of individual conscience, a second necessary element and the opposite of Greek society. So we've moved from what Hegel calls the thesis to the antithesis. The antithesis of Greek society is individual conscience risen to its height in Protestant Europe. But that too turns out to be unstable. It leads to the destruction of the French Revolution and the terror that followed the French Revolution. And so that too must give way to a synthesis, to a third stage, which combines harmony and individual conscience. And very often in this process, that then again serves as the new thesis from which a further antithesis will arise, and the process will continue.
Now, this notion of dialectical change that you've just explained has been so influential ever since Hegel, and it's enormously influential today through Marxism, which embodies it, that I think we must get it completely clear in our minds. So let me just go over it again. The idea is, isn't it, that Hegel put forward that the reason why we human beings are involved in a process of perpetual change is that every complex situation contains within itself conflicting elements, which therefore destabilize the situation. And therefore the situation cannot go on indefinitely. It breaks down into something else within which those conflicts are dissolved or assuaged. But then, of course, in the new situation, you get new conflicts. And so it goes on indefinitely. So you get, as you put it just now, thesis, antithesis, synthesis, which becomes a new thesis using his terminology. And this, Hegelians and following them Marxists think, gives us the key to history, to understanding historical change, the dialectical process. Now, up to that point in the explanation, it would have been open to Hegel to say that the direction that this change took was purely accidental. It could be the random outcome of innumerable random conflicts. But he doesn't say that, does he? He actually thinks this linear process has a direction, has a goal.
That's right. And the goal for Hegel is the greater development of mind towards freedom. We are moving always towards consciousness of freedom, towards realizing human freedom and understanding freedom. And that is a process of increasing awareness of freedom and of increasing knowledge of ourselves.
Now, what is this change happening to? I mean, wherever we talk of change, in any context, whatever, there must be something identifiable that changes. Now, what is it that's changing? In other words, is he writing about whole societies? Is he writing about individuals? What is he writing about in this context?
The short answer is that he's writing neither about individuals nor about societies, but about what he calls Geist. Now, that German word Geist is a difficult one to translate. The easiest way, perhaps, would be to say that it happens to mind. Mind is one normal translation of the German word Geist. We mean, when we talk about mental illness, the German word Geisteskrankheit is mentally ill. So you could say it's happening to mind, to your mind and mine, or all our individual minds. But mind also has another meaning, which goes beyond that. The notion of spirit. We talk about the Zeitgeist, the spirit of the times. Or we talk about Geist when Germans talk about the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. The word Ghost.
Heiliger Geist.
Heiliger Geist, exactly.
Yes.
So it also has, therefore, a somewhat spiritual or religious flavour, which suggests that in some sense there's a reality above and beyond your and my individual mind. And so you could say it's happening to mind, but mind with a capital M, not just mind in the sense of individual human minds.
So is Hegel saying then that total reality is something mental or spiritual, or this word Geist may be poised between the mental and the spiritual, and that all the processes that we're talking about are processes ultimately of this ultimate mental or spiritual thing?
Yes, that's the ultimate view that Hegel comes down to, that reality is Geist, it's ultimately mental or intellectual, and these processes happen to Geist, to mind, as it develops along the way.
Now, to some people listening to the discussion, this might already begin to sound like a very bizarre idea, so I think it's worth pointing out that in fact we're all very familiar with something similar to this in the case of religious beliefs, even if we ourselves are not religious people. I mean, many religious believers, including many Christians, believe that all of reality is ultimately spiritual, and that all of reality ultimately has a spiritual significance or meaning. And I suppose Hegel is saying something very closely related to that, is he? Though not necessarily religious in the conventional sense.
Yes, but the difference might be that the Orthodox Christian view, I think, holds that God is spiritual but separate from the world, and the world is mundane and material. Although it has a spiritual significance, certainly, but it's separate from it. But for Hegel, there's a closer union between the two. You could present the opposite of the Christian view by saying that Hegel is a pantheist, that he believes that God is in the world and in everything. That's perhaps not quite true either, but it's somewhere between the traditional Christian conception and the pantheistic one, that reality is part of God, everything is a manifestation of God, if you want to call it that.
In fact, I mean, it would be true to say that ever since Hegel, there has been a dispute between Hegel scholars or philosophers about precisely this question relating to Hegel's philosophy. Is Hegel's philosophy ultimately religious or not? There are some who've said that it is, there are some who've maintained that it isn't. Which side of that debate do you come down on?
I think that it is immensely valuable to try and interpret Hegel as if he were not religious, because then you find that you can make good sense of a large part of Hegel's philosophy in a non-religious way, just interpreting him as talking about mind, and the common element in mind being our common ability to reason, the fact that our minds are structured in similar principles. But I think I have to admit that though you can push that a long way, you don't really make 100% sense of Hegel in that way. The last 10% perhaps has to assume that there is some religious or quasi-religious view of mind or spirit that lies behind what he's saying.
Now, we've talked about the view of reality as a historical process, which he introduced into Western thought. It's a major idea. And we've talked about this notion of dialectical change, which he introduced and which is a living idea to this day. Another important concept, which I think I'm right in saying he coined, certainly he made it famous, and which has come back again into what one might call intellectual fashion in recent decades, is the concept of alienation. Hegel had a great deal to say about alienation, didn't he? Now, what exactly did he mean by that term?
By alienation, Hegel meant the idea that something which is in fact us or part of us seems to us foreign, alien, and hostile. Let me give you an example. He presents a picture of what he calls the unhappy soul, which is an alienated form of religion. The unhappy soul is the person who prays to a God whom he regards as all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-good, and who sees himself, by contrast, as powerless, ignorant, and base. So this person is unhappy because he demeans himself and puts all those qualities into some being which he sees as separate from himself. Hegel says that this is wrong. We are, in fact, part of God, or if you like, we are projecting our qualities into God, and we should take that back. The way to overcome that kind of alienation would be to realize that we and God are one, and that we have those qualities. They are not something separate and foreign.
I was going to say, he would say specifically that these are human, and perhaps only human qualities, which we are projecting onto an all-powerful being, denying them to ourselves, when it is in fact we who have them. They originate with humanity.
The claim that they are only human was actually made by one of his later disciples, Ludwig Feuerbach. He wouldn't have said that, but he would have said that we and that kind of divine spirit are all part of the same reality, Geist or mind.
Now, you've explained very clearly, I think, how Hegel saw total reality as being a process of change which was moving forward in a certain way, the dialectical movement. What is it going towards? What is the goal? What's the end of this movement?
The end point of the dialectical process is mind coming to know itself as the ultimate reality, and thus as seeing everything that it took to be foreign and hostile to itself as in fact part of itself. And that for Hegel is simultaneously a state of absolute knowledge, when mind knows, recognizes at last itself as the ultimate reality, and also a state of absolute freedom, when mind, instead of being controlled by external forces, is able to order the world in a rational way, because now it sees that the world is in fact itself, and it only has to implement its own principle of rationality onto the world to organize the world rationally. Now, the interesting thing about this culminating process is that because it occurs once mind understands that it is the reality of everything, if you ask the question, when does this actually happen? Well, it happens when Hegel's own mind in his philosophical writings, thoughts, grasps the idea that mind is everything. And then he's achieved this. It's not just that Hegel describes the goal, the culmination of all this process, but Hegel's philosophy actually is the very culmination of the whole process he's describing.
So when Hegel published his main works, that was total reality at last, achieving awareness of itself, achieving self-knowledge.
Yes.
It's an amazing piece of sort of grandiose self-projection on the part of a philosopher. I'm not sure quite that Hegel realized that it could be seen in this light. Now, one thing that strikes one about the aim towards which all this is moving, in the way you just put it, is that it's sometimes seen as freedom, sometimes seen as self-knowledge. And Hegel clearly did think that those were, in some sense, the same thing. And I think a little more needs to be said about that, because it's not at all clear, I think, to most people how self-knowledge can itself constitute freedom.
Well, self-knowledge becomes freedom because of the particular nature of mind and of Hegel's idea that mind is the ultimate reality of the world. You see, in the historical process up to the point at which we recognize that, if you like, it's our world, that we are all, up to that point, we have really been pawns in the game. We haven't been controlling the game. We haven't been controlling the historical stage because things have been happening to us without us realizing or understanding why they happen. Because what we take to be foreign and hostile aspects of the world are in fact part of us. But once we come to see that we are everything in the world, then we understand the process. We grasp, if you like, the laws of historical development, and we see that those laws are in fact our own reason. They are the very laws of our mind and our thinking.
Was this behind the famous quotation that's often made from Hegel, the real is the rational, and the rational is the real? That what exists does correspond to
what is rational. That's right.
Yes.
And when we come to see that, then we are free because we see the rationality of reality, and it no longer strikes us as something contrary to our interests. We no longer struggle against it. We understand it as in fact our own rational principle, and we are free to flow along with it and indeed to order it and direct it in accordance with those laws of reason.
Now, one characteristic of Hegel's thought, which you've made very clear, is that he always sees ideas not just as existing in the abstract, and certainly not being timeless and unchanging in the way that, say, Plato saw them, but as being embodied in societies and institutions and historical realities which change. Now, given that fact, what sort of society does Hegel see this whole process as culminating in? What sort of society is it leading towards?
Well, as you'd expect from what we've been saying, it's a rational society, a rationally ordered society. But I must make clear what that is for Hegel, because it's not the society of pure reason. Hegel saw the society of pure reason as typified by the kind of thing that the French revolutionaries wanted to do. You know, they didn't just get rid of the king and the nobles and of religion, but they tried to make everything rational. They said, why have months of irregular days? Why not make them all the same number of days? Why have weeks of 7 days? Let's make them 10, like our decimal system of measurement and so on. Now, Hegel saw that as leading to a kind of madly abstract notion of reason, rather like, for instance, the view of a town planner who might look at a map of London and say, oh, well, your streets all run crooked and traffic has to make detours and so on. Let's get rid of this. Let's tear all the buildings down, make nice straight streets. In each block, we'll put a big high-rise apartment. We can fit more people in. You can have a smooth green lawn outside for the children to play, and it'll all be beautiful and ordered and rational.
Well, we've actually had that in London, and it's been catastrophic.
That's right. And Hegel would have predicted that it would have been catastrophic because it was abstract reason taken to an extreme. For Hegel, what a rational ordering of London town planning would be to look at the real, that is London as it exists, find what's rational in the real, and of course it has developed the way it did for certain reasons, there's the rational element, and then try and follow those reasons through in a way that fulfills the rationale behind London's development without trying to raise it down and start anew, to get rid of some of the arbitrary and capricious points perhaps that are particular problems, but basically to find what's rational in what's real and enhance it and develop it and allow it to fulfill itself.
One criticism that's always been brought forward against this conception of the state, the rational state, by liberal philosophers in the Anglo-Saxon tradition especially, is that by seeing the state as an organic whole, which behaves rationally and orders everything rationally, Hegel leaves no room at all for individual dissent, criticism, freedom, one can say, eccentricity. There's no room in the system for the individual to behave as he likes. What's your comment on that?
I don't think there's any evidence that Hegel was opposed to some individual freedoms. But what is true is that his view of freedom was not the standard Anglo-Saxon liberal view of freedom. To look at the difference between the two, let's shift to a somewhat different area, economics and the idea of freedom in the economic sphere, in the market. According to one view, the liberal view, freedom consists simply in people being able to do as they prefer. If I prefer to wear an orange shirt this spring, for instance, then I'm free if I can do that. If I prefer to buy a deodorant, I'm free if I can do that. And that's all that the liberal economist will ask. Are you free to choose the preferences that you have to fulfill them? But some of the more radical economists have questioned that, and they've said that's a very superficial notion of freedom. You should ask, why do you want to wear an orange shirt this season? Why do you want to use a deodorant? Why don't you accept that a certain amount of natural body odour isn't a problem or whatever? And the radical economists will say the reason is that you've been manipulated. There are people who want to make a profit out of you buying their deodorant, out of you thinking that the clothes, the colours you wore last season are no longer good enough this season. So you've been manipulated. You're not free. You have to ask not only can you do what you prefer, but why do you prefer what you prefer? Are they rational preferences? Are they preferences that satisfy your needs? Now, Hegel would have been in the latter camp. He would have said, freedom is more than just ability to follow your own caprice. Freedom must consist in fulfilling yourself as a rational individual.
That sounds all very well, but surely what it's going to mean in practice is that I think I know what I want. I want to wear an orange shirt this spring, and I want to go out and buy a deodorant in hot weather. But we have a state, perhaps, which says, no, you think you want those, but those are not rational preferences on your part. We know what's best for you. We know even what you would want if your preferences were rational. In other words, you get a state that not only knows what's good for you better than you do yourself, you actually get a state that knows what you want better than you know yourself. And surely that's authoritarian in the extreme in its relation to the individual.
I think in practice you're probably right, and I don't know that Hegel has any reply to that objection. The only thing that he can say is that while it might be very difficult in practice to work out how you could have a society in which individuals genuinely realise their rational self without an authoritarian state, that doesn't mean that you've overcome the problem by the liberal laissez-faire notion. I mean, we still do have to face that problem, that people's wants and desires might be being manipulated, and to the extent that they are, it's perhaps misleading to say that they're really free.
Where the fuck is this place? I think it's... Is this it? Oh, there's some stairs.
Password.
Qui non intelligit aut taciat aut discat.
It was meant as a kind of introduction, which would bring together a great many stories and poems that I thought was very appropriate.
Rubbish. Only good for the dustbin. Wind up.
The thing that sets the Americans apart from the rest of the cultures in the world is we're so fucking stupid. This country's been around for a couple hundred years and we think we're hot shit. And we don't even realize that other countries have thousands of years of history and culture, and they're proud of it. And when we deal on an international level, with foreign policy and stuff like that, and we try and go in as, we're a big American, strong country and all that stuff, they must laugh up their sleeves at us because we are nothing. We are culturally nothing. We mean nothing. We're only interested in the bottom line. Every other country has their own art, their own music, their own theater, their own drama, their folk dances, folk songs, folklore, and it means something to them, and they're proud of it, and that's their ethnic heritage. We have Levi's, we have designer jeans, we have hamburgers, we have Coca-Cola, we have REO Speedwagon, we have Journey, we have this one, we have that one, and then we go out there and we say, yeah, but we also have neutron bombs and poison gas, so maybe that makes up for it.
Oh, God, kill me. Chat! We already went over this, okay? Just because America has indoctrination does not mean that it's equivalent to what other countries do all the time, okay? Holy shit. The reason why America has been so successful in its global order is because we rely on subtle and passive indoctrination, okay? We do not have George Washington fucking framed photos hanging in front of every classroom. You idiots would probably sit in a fucking National Socialist Nazi German classroom and go like, oh yeah, sure, they seek Heil before and after every class are taught about the immortal ideological doctrine of National Socialism, and they have to worship Hitler before and after every period. But America also has, you know, we teach Christopher Columbus, so they're basically the same thing. Chill the fuck out, okay? We get it, you're woke.
It's really kind of sad when you evaluate it that way. And I think that a country that doesn't do something to sustain its culture, whatever it is, doesn't invest in it, doesn't keep it happening, isn't proud of it, maybe they just shouldn't exist. Because it's the culture and the beautiful things that a society produces, those are the things that should survive for thousands of years, not the designer genes.
That's how that seems to be what the true horrors I expect in America anyway of coming soon to theaters near you will be this sort of like that. We already see it with all the mental illness discourse. Everyone's like talking about how everyone needs to go to therapy. Like guys will do XYZ, but won't go. Guys will read the collected works of Hegel, but they won't go to therapy. That these sorts of memes. Where, you know, again, like the reduction is like you just need to go see a professional for that and get diagnosed for a thing. And then there's, you know, if you feel wrong about the world that you're in right now, it's probably your fault. It's not the world's fault, or there isn't anything wrong with the world. There's something wrong with you. That seems to be the route that we're going down. Like even when it comes to like some of my problems with like the gender ideology also is that it's like maybe that isn't like this sort of feeling or like this sort of feeling of potential androgyny in oneself or like identification with the opposite sort of sex and things like this. Maybe that's like not a problem to be solved, like
right.
through some sort of diagnosis and process and things like that. Maybe this is just like a part of like an internal journey of like self-understanding and things like this. Like maybe like not to say like, oh, it's just a phase in a sort of diminutive or diminishing sense, but more like that the medicalization of it, of what is fundamentally like a kind of poetic act, right? Like this sort of analogization of yourself with the other, in that sense is like, that's a poetic action. It's where like to put it in the realm of like policy debates and like medical health and things like this is like smuggling in something, like it's smuggling in a sort of even religious assumption to justify all of the institutional practices.
Yes, to me it is just so obviously the case, as you put it, and that simply is having been educated in poetic and spiritual traditions. That is to say, you can look at any phenomenon of the androgyne, which is a central part of the myth that Bo Brockman is reading through me, and Bo Brockman himself being an androgyne. There's no such thing as dysmorphia as a pathology, right? Unless everyone is dysmorphic, because everyone poetically recognizes the presence of male and female within them. But it's important to recognize, in the same way, again, that a poet would recognize the convention that he must work within, the difference between that and the rigors of the form we are given, that is to say, the sex, with exceptions, of course, the very few hermaphroditic. And all of those things are explored by older cultures, by ancient cultures, even prehistoric cultures, in ways that are instantly more convincing because of how more flexible they are than the therapeutic and managerial, to be honest, approaches of today. And it does cause an almost, again, I guess it's the same thing about not wanting to face the necessity of shaping desire, of recognizing limits to it, and it's expressed in no better way than the kind of double consciousness, although I don't want to dignify it by calling it that. I guess the schizophrenia of attributing a kind of essentiality to the gender, right? While at the same time wishing it to be Judith Butler performative kind of thing. And
yeah, they don't really have all their ducks in a row, man. Like, it's not like they're all on the same page on what the ideological justification is, which is also really hard to, it makes it even harder to talk to people about, because, you know, sometimes you're talking to someone and they're saying that, like, you know, we have like pre-extant, essentially gendered souls that can sometimes be put into the wrong bodies. And then sometimes it's entirely performative and socially constructed, but in doing that, they accept that because everything's socially constructed and reified in this way, that there is never and there is not anything called male or female, like that there is no correlative to that was always performative too. Like us noticing in animal life, even the differences between the male of a species and the female of a species is like ultimately just like us, constructing something and not referring to any sort of reality. Like they want, like I was saying, that the real options we have here on this front, and it's ones that no one on the right wants to cognize or whatever, because they have all their own psychosexual pathologies and trauma to deal with. But it's really about either abolishing sex or abolishing gender. And I think we should just abolish gender, because it seems to me to just be dumb. And most people already function this way, where like, you know, they don't actually believe that, you know, like most people aren't like, oh, you're not a man if you like know how to cook or something like that. I feel like a lot of that is gone. There's kind of like this, it's weird. People on the right are kind of even willing themselves to like resurrect this form of like masculinity policing or whatever. You know, being like, oh, you're not a real man because you don't lift or something like that.
I was accused of that in defending Lorca by a couple of people the other day, which is just fascinating to me that could happen. That I was accused of policing masculinity by. I don't think that they knew. I thought that maybe they thought I had written the poem or something, and
they probably just like have like you can just say that. You can call anyone a cop at any time, and you're a fed or whatever. It's fine. Yeah, but they're not even really that serious. Like a lot of those people.
As our former president would say, they're not sending their best.
They're not sending their best. I say that all the time, man. They're not sending their best, folks.
He really, other than Tim Dillon, he really is the most brilliant comedian of the age.
It's really, we're really blessed that he replaced Joe Rogan so fast. That was truly a blessing.
That Tim replaced Rogan, you mean?
Yeah,
of course, absolutely. I was going to say, and then in terms of, you know, older cultures as well. So, for instance, I know that there are Native American tribes where those who we might call transsexual today have a particular ritual, a set of steps, many of them horrific for all but those who feel they must take them, to manifest these kinds of changes and to give them a place rather than sort of drifting atomistically around, which is to say you have the shamanic figures are generally the ones who seem particularly perceptive of what today would be called, as if it were a problem, dysmorphia. And then you have actual instances of men, say, castrating themselves, right? But at that point, they don't create a political movement and exist apart from everyone else. They would essentially move in with the women after they've castrated themselves and live in that fashion. They're still part of a structure that everyone shares in. And that's a completely different kind of, first of all, it requires much more courage and fortitude to castrate oneself and to go and to yield oneself.
To do it yourself too.
You do it yourself. You do it without anesthesia, others, probably some herbal sedatives and analgesics involved. And then afterwards, not to point at everyone else, right, and to say this entire culture is absolutely corrupt and restrictive, and I'm going over here and I'm making this flag and I'm doing that. No, you go from one lodge, as it were, to another, right? You're still yielding yourself to the communal, and so it's a completely different thing. I recognize the impetus in that sense because it is so transcultural, but the particular political and managed corporatism aspects of it in this culture are uniquely pathological.
It's bad, man, because in that case, like what existed was the stage for such like ritualistic or like psychodramatic activity, like where like the act of castrating yourself there is like beyond even just the physical act of castrating yourself. It has like this symbolic meaning also, like in the communal world that like, you know what I mean? Yeah. But we don't have like our ground, our stage upon which we have these ritual activities because we need them. Like you can't have a society without having a stage for people to like perform themselves on, or to perform the story of the society. But ours is these private, is like all these, it's just corporate entities. Like it all happens on these corporate entities, and that the sort of medium itself is determining a lot of that. So it can't just be done in like taken care of on your own, like in society through these other things. It turns out you actually need, you need hormones now. You need like all these you need these expensive treatments, like all of a sudden it becomes like it takes on the analogies of like the issues of birth control, right? That's sort of the model that we're working with now. Is like there was also, in the past, there was birth control. There was people, like there was abortions, and there was contraceptives of various kinds. All of these things existed in the past already, but like they've taken on this new meaning at once they've been turned into like a very particular type of commodity. It is now like a commodity purchase that you're not allowed to consider them luxury goods, right? Basically, this is no longer like a luxury good. Getting birth control, access to birth control, is not a luxury good.
Yes, and its potencies are taken for granted, right? That is to say that its instrumentality is assumed to be all there is to it. It's not embedded within a communal symbol system into which all of its associations and possible ramifications have been thought of and placed in ways that everyone can contemplate and figure them. It's just a thing that does this thing for you, and that's it. That's all it does, and that's a problem too. I mean, and that may just be a consequence of what you're talking about. But it certainly is the way it's reduced into only its function, or it's the attempt is to get it as contained as possible. That containing motive is itself a residuum of a fuller symbolic understanding, correct? Because of course there's the drawing of circles, there's the warding or apotropaic gestures, there's the delineating of spaces in which certain kinds of rites or rituals will be made, because there's an understanding that in particular instances you have to specify what kinds of associations and powers you wish to recognize or to call upon. So there was this sense on the left of the fertility of these groups, and of course stretching back before the Iraq War. I guess Demonomania is written in 2000, something like that, although it comes from an experience branching out before that for Crowley, a sort of cultural sense. And how that maps onto our sense of how political factions play out today. Because as you say, there's the drumming up of the fear of the January 6th as being, agents fully in command of kind of, directed military sophisticated treasonous activities, versus the more likely thing that these are pathetic people who are directed by kind of influencers online, and then those influencers are involved in.
Yeah. So do you remember the guy in the Viking outfit?
Sure.
Okay. So his lawyer, right, is basically like one of his defenses, like his official defense was like, this guy's kind of retarded. Like, this is like literally what he said. He's like, a lot of these were like sort of like short bus people, and they were getting like psychologically manipulated by people on the internet. Like, they're not like in like full possession of their minds. Like, if you ask them like what they believe they were doing and stuff like that, it becomes very clear that like these aren't like these hyper sophisticated operators. They're desperate people who are on like the fringes of society, and it's like they got handed to them like a ready-made meaning in life that made them feel like on the side of like the forces of power, but the power being like a good power. And it's like, I can't really like be mad at that. And I mean, I've seen this happen with like people I've known, right? Like I remember sort of with like horror once, I went back home, and it was like mid-college, and one of my friends had become like, he kind of had like a bit of a depressive episode. He was like, got like, was like dropping out of college. He didn't know what to do with his life. He was doing a lot of drugs and watching a lot of like YouTube kind of conspiracy theory documentaries and stuff like that. And he became like a very ardent flat earther. And I couldn't really tell if he was like putting me on or like messing around with me or whatever. And it was like very difficult to kind of talk him down. He kind of just like dissipated over time as his like life got better, as his prospects seemed better. But this is what happens, right? In a desperate circumstance, this is what people reach out for.
There's nothing else to turn to. There's no culture to speak of. People are separated from their families. And you've got something online which is talking about time travel and various strange levels of irony, which reveal the kind of multi-constructedness of it. But they're going to turn to this, and so I guess my question there is whether the fear that Christian fascism itself was some kind of self-motivating force that was dangerous was short-sighted, in the sense that today I think it's much clearer to us that the GOP are not some kind of capable alternative faction, but rather just kind of the losers of a larger group they have a niche of people they feed upon, the QAnoners or whoever, or those who think they have some kind of future as a party, industrial policy or whatever it is, versus the DNC, who have kind of a wider range of people they feed upon. But the GOP are still losers. They're not the forces. They're not the uprising forces. These are like the people who are being stomped out in time, basically. I think that like in the middle of the 20th century, like, second half of the 20th century, this was like more defensible. Because like I can remember like going back in my mind to the Bush era of my youth. And this was like, this was like when there was like the people canceling, the people calling up for boycotts, and all of these things were these sort of like Christian identity groups, right? And like they were the butt of all jokes, though, at the same time. Like they were presented as this sort of like upswelling, like potentially like insurgent uprising, like growing, swelling ranks of Christian identity people. But it's really that whole fear, that whole world. And I remember believing this too, and being like kind of horrified at the idea that this was possible or feasible. It's totally seems like a joke at this point. Like the idea that, but at the same time today we have trending on Twitter is a Republican Jesus, where everyone's just talking about making the standard thing being like, these people aren't even really Christians because the Republican Party doesn't stand for like Christianity or whatever. And like it's the same sort of tired rhetoric about this that has been played out forever and ever. And in a weird way, I think, though, this is indicative that, like, if there is this sort of Christian identity fascism that we have to look for as, like, emerging in America,
I think that what we have to look at now is that this Christian fascism is like it's like it takes a lot from evangelical hermeneutics, evangelical world formations, community formations, etc. But it's now waving like the rainbow flag. And like you can see this at a lot of these sorts of churches themselves. Like a lot of churches are now flying that flag. So it seems to me like this was something that was overcome and sublated by like what we would call like these tactics of the losers are kind of now owned almost entirely by like the party of the winners.
That's my sense exactly. And I mean, there is that dialectical, I think, that has happened, and in which we can look back on something like Bloom and his generation consumed with the idea that if Romney won, he was going to initiate a Mormon fascist.
Yeah, it was going to turn into a Handmaid's Tale. If Mitt Romney was president, everyone would be dressing like Puritans.
Right, as opposed to just another, tax cut of some kind. But Bloom is correct, I think, in the sense that the particular, as you say, evangelical ethos, and you said this on Twitter, well, in reference to the powerhouse group in Egypt's relation to the Bible, a worship of the book without reading the book, and in some ways, many of the complaints about nascent second, third-hand distillations of theory from the academy and how they've played out into various institutional, I don't know if philosophy is the right word, but kind of institutional programs at this point are all connected. So one thing, go ahead.
I was just gonna I feel that way too. Like with a lot of people, like the conservatives or whatever, they'll talk about how there's like all this like theory brainwashing going on in colleges and stuff like that. Or it's like they're like, oh man, the Frankfurt School, all these kids reading Adorno and Horkheimer and Walter Benjamin. These are your social justice warriors or whatever. Like they're all reading Derrida and Foucault and Deleuze, and it's like, no, they're not reading anything. Like they don't read anything at all. Like they're worshiping like that sort of stuff in the same way like they hold theory the way that like an evangelical holds the Bible. They're not reading it. It's just a representation. It's like they just point to it, and that's all they have to do.
It seems like again one of those dangers into which even the good liberal is led.
It's all very dumb to me. Like the whole IQ discussion seems kind of like trivial to me. It's only in our particular circumstances where like class divides are done through this sort of algorithmic sorting through basically proxy IQ tests in like the college board, like run by the Gates family, of course, running the SAT tests and things to divide us up into our future socioeconomic casts, which are supposed to correlate like directly with like your IQ or something like that. It's only in like this context where people take like your IQ as like your inherent value or potential as a human being. And that's why it has all these like other political connotations and things like this, because like it's really dumb because like you could just be like, okay, so like let's imagine that like you're right and like you're saying like, okay, we have like a whole population of people who like don't have like feasible options in the IQ strata for gainful employment or something. Like the conclusion isn't like I guess what do we do with them? Like what do we do with these people that are like a burden upon us? It's like, well, maybe like we have like that's not a good society to have. One in which like someone who isn't like over 100 IQ, above average IQ, and like just like particularly suited towards hyper rationalized and abstracted labor in say like moving around emails and keeping a track of correspondence and Excel charts and stock prices and brand relationships. Maybe like you shouldn't have a world in which like that is the thing that the most people have to do, because that's a little insane. Like maybe like people who are like below like functional IQ, right? Like even this like like the handicap to a degree, this idea that they're just like going to have to exist as fundamentally burdens on the state or on the body politic is also, I think, like this just like hidden assumption in this whole discourse. Like it's like everyone has this sort of like occulted assumptions of like eugenics and like liberal rationalism, which is the real problem, and not like the various metrics or quantifications that they can come up with later. Those are pretty trivial. Like, I don't really care what my IQ is rated at. Like, that doesn't really say anything at all. Maybe it would say something to a prospective employer or something, but I don't know. I just think, I feel like it's like fairly trivial. That's like what rootedness is now, is like in my area, right? It's like, you know, you go to Dunks with your Patriots gear on, you get your coffee, you get your donut, and you know, you drink New England style IPAs, and you have clam chowder sometimes, and that's pretty much what it is to be a New Englander these days. Is hyper specifically being like a super fan for the Patriots mostly, and it used to be like the Red Sox, like for baseball and stuff like that, but that sort of faded. Baseball sort of is dying, thankfully, because it's the most boring fucking sport in the world. But when I grew up, it was like our religion, kind of, specifically the Red Sox, because there was this whole like set of mythology around it, and like folk practices, like things to do during like almost any of the given innings to give like good luck to your team and things like this.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so I feel like that's where like the localism is through these sorts of it's kind of sad because they're ultimately just these privately owned corporations, but that's where people craft their identities. If they're going to have like a regional identity, they mostly will never change their loyalty to a sports team, even if they move.
Like I remember recently, I actually just I was bored one night and I like watched Ready Player One, you know, the like dreadful.
Dude, I had to watch that. I watched that on a flight because I was like, I have to fucking see.
Yeah. And it's kind of weird because like you're watching all this like CGI stuff happening, and you're like, it occurred to me while I was watching it, I was like, this actually isn't even real in the world of the film that I'm watching it in. You know what I mean? Like it's like,
well, it's not real on like multiple levels, because it's not like they were making like sets even. Like it's it's like simulations like on so many levels.
Yeah. But there's so many things like this now, like this new like the new what is it called? It's like Space Jam movie that's going to come out. Like these huge like crossover movies that are just like populated with like
it's the corporate orgy, man. It's like the intellectual property orgy. It's like everyone. It's like, but this is sort of how people's fucking sexualities are formed now, though, right? Because like kids now, like what's the first porn that they're going to encounter is going to be like Rule 34, like all these like sort of like kids show universe characters, and what they're going to see, like, and it's going to be like massive crossovers in like the forms of like orgies even, where it's like, oh, like here's Timmy Turner and Jimmy Neutron and fucking Finn from Adventure Time and fucking Steven's Universe and all the ones that are too new for me to know, and they're all sucking each other's dicks and they're all fucking, and it's like like this is, but like that's what Space Jam is. That's what gonna be all the Warner Brothers guys like all together. And then like what do you do, like, you know, your family vacation in the summer, and it's like, oh folks, we're going to Disney World, or we're going to Six Flags, and it's all the same. It's like the same thing. It's like the big corporate orgy.
Wait a minute, Doc. Are you telling me that it's 8:25? Precisely. Damn. I'm late for school.
it speaks to the heart of what is good and true.
Rosicrucian Spice Force.
Well, my folks thought I was heaven sent. Just knew I'd grow up to be a president. Man, I sure did blow their plans when I wound up being this here garbage man. But I know, yes I know, I'm a pseudo-psycho intuition politician. Pseudo-psycho intuition politician, yeah!
Like, I got a lot of love for them, but like, man, I absolutely hate the like enlightened, you know, oh my god, I did LSD once and it like changed my life forever types. Like, oh, I cannot stand them. Like,
You always ask them like, "Oh, what'd you learn?" And they're like, "Nothing."
dude, like,
Hey, what do we do with our social nuts now? Get them out of their insane rut. Give them a voltage, keep them in stitches now. Probably more fun than we were out birding witches. But I know, yes I know, I'm a pseudo-psycho intuition politician. Pseudo-psycho intuition politician. Oh, come on!
Collaborate all of these sort of like these properties or these like sort of commodities together into a package like of an aesthetic or whatever. And you're like, this was the 60s. It was this album. It was this book. It was this movie, or, you know, this culturally significant event or whatever. But the truth of the matter is that, like, you know, all time and all places, they all flow into each other. So like to artificially segment off like a decade of time in a specific area and then be like, this is like the world that I like is just like a complete alienation. It's like a complete reification of basically marketing and like consumerism.
Well, yeah, we gotta go back to the time when, you know, Chef Boyardee commercials were like trad and based, and it was about a white family.
Yeah, can you believe that they have? I can't believe that there's black kids in my Chef Boyardee commercial.
That was, okay, by the way, that was literally like verbatim a Nick Fuentes talking point. I mean,
oh my god!
Yeah, I mean,
he used to watch streams, and he would literally be nostalgic about Chef Boyardee commercials.
Yeah,
it's honestly
he's a fucking, like, I call these people Satanists, but like he's actually he's a Christian. Like, really? You think,
Quote,
does anyone
unquote.
believe that?
He got
destroyed
by Jay.
He's a successful theater kid, basically.
Oh my, so true.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily.
He's also actually gay. Like, not that I'm trying to be mean or anything, or like trying to like slander him, but like it's very obvious.
It's an open secret, as far as I know. It's an open secret. But I think anyone should be like, I don't know. I guess this is something I kind of had to learn the hard way. But like, I feel like anyone should be like, anyone who is into Christianity and is into learning about the ideals and all that should be very wary of like people who call themselves Christian and who are like, you know, just like extremely openly racist and like extremely openly like, I don't know, like anti-trans or like whatever, you know, because it's like, yes, sure, like you can point problems out like in people, but you should never like discard the people like altogether. I mean, at least from my understanding.
Yeah,
Well,
a huge percentage of the internet, right, that flaunts like Christian iconography and whatnot, they lack love, like to the highest of levels. They don't.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the only important part, right?
Yeah. The only thing that, like, the most important ingredient, and it's like, wow, like you really had, like, it's like you had everything you had everything like lined up, and then the one most important thing, and it's like, oh, whoops, like I guess I forgot an ingredient.
What they actually
there.
like is empire. Like, that's what they mean when they talk about like the church, or when they talk about God, they mean like the emperor. Like, they mean, that's what
Templars.
they mean in this. Exactly. Yeah, they are Templars. Like they call themselves Templars, right? They say like Deus Vult, et cetera, et cetera. And go look at the Crusader pins. I love these. I was looking at the Crusader pins of like where it's just a bunch of like dicks like carrying a vagina, and that was like one of the pins that like the Templars and things like that, like that they used to like. It was like they were little NFTs of the time, you could say. But they were all incels. Like, they were going on the crusade because they didn't have anything at home, you know? They were like, yeah, I want adventure in my life because
I don't have anything to live for. Like I'm alone and I work a job I hate, and what I really want is to like go like kill people and like live an exciting life in like the sort of BAP adventurist way. And that's actually what BAP's whole fucking grad school thesis is about. Is that like Nietzscheanism provides liberalism the means to like cultivate like a special forces unit. Like you need like liberalism's defense force. This is actually in Nietzsche. Nietzsche says that liberalism in and of itself is bad, but when people are rallying to defend liberalism against like communism and like in his time, like the earlier days of socialism, people rallying to defend liberalism, like that was like true reactionary, like that was like cool, because then you could use illiberal tactics, right? Suddenly you can act more like a Roman emperor so long as you're doing it in defense of liberalism.
Speaking on the Nick Fuentes being gay thing, I mean, that's something you see a lot in these types of communities where you get really insular and you like keep fetishizing like smaller and smaller demographics of humanity because you think you're like better than the rest and you're going to be the real like sons of history, move everything forward. I mean, you see this with BAP people. It's funny, but they love dick and they love their trans girls. I mean, you see it all the time. There's so many examples of it.
Dude,
it's hilarious.
I think like one of the most insidious things about all of the sort of like those spheres is like it's basically just like they're instrumentalizing like high schoolers to be their like mimetic foot soldiers. It's horrible.
It's
you look at like a Baptist like Twitter account, they just block out their faces and all tweet the same things. Like they're becoming the bug men they rail against.
Cars are sacrilegious.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think cars are like the liberal. It's like we are cars. We're modeled as cars, and like cars are like the highway system is also like cybernetically designed. So, like when you're driving on America's highway systems, it's like being inside of a computer. If you're in a place that's like a specifically car designed city, it kind of feels like if you fly above them, they look exactly like a circuit board.
This is why season 3 is so good.
But the train is the communist form of transportation, and it's also superior to the airplane.
The thing that's worrisome is like the people being sent over as like the Africa hands here. I think one is a fucking Mnuchin, but the other one is like what is like head like USAID and like has spent all of her time in Tigray. So obviously they're going over there to negotiate a peace that is effectively in that interest. But what do they get out of it is the question. Like what kind of geopolitical thing is America trying to gain here is what's in question, because that'll basically determine what happens, frankly.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct, man. And it's I believe, at least from what I've seen on Twitter, right? I think the analysis, other than you, that's why I was like really like hyped, just to see you, Project Ethiopia is a go, right? That's why I was very, I was happy to see that this geopolitical lens taken, just that you took, right, on the conflict in Ethiopia, Tigray, and whatnot. That's why it's much more important, because coverage I've seen lately, especially on Twitter at least, and obviously that's not the
yeah. Well, like it's like what's MK Ultra saying is like what's on Twitter is trending.
Yeah, like it was strictly ideological or it was moralistic. Right, that was the general like line, I guess, right? That was taken.
Well, if you want to understand the American mind, just understand them trying to script like a Hallmark movie or something out of the conflict, because everything is just fodder for like a narrative, for specifically like a very sentimental narrative. So like which one would make them feel good, like so they have to portray like the villains and the heroes here. That's like how it all works. So they're gonna go like, oh, these are this is like they're probably in favor of like Tigray national self-determination, because for some fucking reason everyone's an ethnic nationalist internationally. It's so weird. They're all like, oh, like this. It's fucking weird.
It becomes a trend for people, without like actually like analyzing the history and whatnot.
Yeah, they don't care. They just want to have a cause to feel good about. But if it's you can launder that cause to get some geopolitical capital in America, then that's what's going to happen. So yeah, I'm just wondering, like, what do you think AOC is going to side for on here when eventually this conflict makes its way to the American left? What do you think their response is going to be?
I like I'm excited to hear it, because it'll give me a good debate topics. But I'm sure it's going to be uh the terrible Ethiopian are is genociding, all these people out of the wazoo, right? I mean, I can't wait to see people, all over the online left call Ethiopians like fascist orientated, right? Because like I think a couple weeks ago,
Chauvinism. There's
yeah,
I'm predicting a connection to like Han chauvinism, like the rise of Eurasian chauvinism and things like that. I could even see Ethiopians getting their blackness taken away from them in
literally,
this
yeah,
conflict.
especially because after they elected a Republican governor in Virginia, right? They were literally like it was by a margin of like 50,000, right? And that's the Ethiopian American
About that, because
population.
those guys are based as fuck.
Yeah.
Like, we fucking hate the Democrats. We're never voting for them again. I was like, well, these guys are great. I love
Yeah,
those
like
guys.
they were literally the deciders for the election. Like that's like the exact number of like Ethiopian Americans in Virginia.
Yeah. So like that heralds to me like a sort of geopolitical shift, right? And they're in like if you have the Ethiopian American bloc
Yeah.
going to the Republicans and they've like put in the Prosperity Party guy, and now you have the Democrats pretty much effectively supporting as best as they can, doing a regime change of this party, while at the same time the like Ethiopians in America are like switching parties effectively.
Yeah, I mean, Ethiopians are big in America, like they're starting to really use the political clout they have. And this was the first time in history it's materialized in America, right? And I think they need to take a step back, right? Because lately the Democrats have been like heralding victory after victory in the American South, right? After like Georgia, after Florida, and whatnot, right? And Ethiopians, right, the ones that are trying to declare war on, actively fighting back against this Democrat incursion, right, into Virginia, right? Uh, I think it will make them realize that we really our job fundamentally is to get elected here, right? And these guys are really preventing us from doing it. So perhaps we'll see this a campaign to demonize Ethiopian Americans subtly, just like that same campaign was done with Chinese people, and how it almost directly like caused this spike in anti Asian hate crime, right? I have no reservations that might happen with Ethiopian Americans, especially because I would argue this Democrat orientated news political machine, right? This media political machine, it's gonna mobilize against Ethiopians. Maybe we're the next target, but I think because of this election, I think we're fully prepared to fight back with our votes and anything else we need to do.
There's like some pretty funny. I found some good like Chinese propaganda YouTuber like where they're just like making fun of like the investigation into it because it was like a non-event. Like it's literally like it's a complete hallucination. This idea of there being like a Uyghur genocide or something is like completely made up. It's a complete fabrication by like the what is it? The NED. I don't know. There's all these like CIA cutout like NGO organizations that are like ostensibly like third party actors who are investigating these things, but they just literally like fabricate shit. Like when they actually went to do like an investigation in Xinjiang, like when the UN did, like they had to like fucking wrap it up because there's nothing going on there that's like out of the norm for like civilization, like a normal state.
Most would be like a comparison. Maybe like they had like something similar to like mental institutions where they would put dissidents in or something to reform their behavior. But apart from that, I can't imagine them having much else than that.
The thing is that the people that they were like reforming are people who are like being like radicalized into like terrorism, and it's like we
don't we have like actual terrorist attacks inside Xinjiang? Like
like that's like during the Obama era, no one like talks about it, but there was like tons of like suicide bombings and shit in that area. And like the Chinese Communist Party has actually done a really good job of like, like cultivating like in elites within Xinjiang to like, take control of the problem themselves. Like everything in China is much more like federated. Like the local response is being done by like the local authorities. It's not like this extreme like federal intervention. Like we literally project like what our image of that would be. Like, it's funny. They're like, oh, it's like ICE. It's like America. It's like what we're doing, but worse, even though it's not worse. Like everything that we project onto these Eurasian civilizations are like the specters and shadows of our own system. and like we're like that those that like they're like we imagine as like the shadows cast by our fucking state. Like, oh, like everything that we do in the shadows, they just do openly, and it's like it's pretty funny. It's honestly pretty funny to like see.
Yeah, like China's heading towards some kind of cultural, like homogenous, like culturally homogenous sort of direction.
Yeah, they're like
whereas,
it's the
complete opposite.
They're gonna make you eat bugs and live in the pod in China. Meanwhile, in China, they're like giving people like low interest business loans to like, you know, buy like build the houses, and like they're trying to like get the cost of beef lower so that children can have access to like better like high quality protein. You know,
It's like literally good, to be honest.
It's literally the exact inverse like of everything. Like I think they actually are just looking at America and saying, let's do the exact opposite of that. So they're like, oh, there's like a huge like student debt crisis in America. So now they're doing rolling out like experimental procedures in certain provinces where college graduates get like not even just like loans to go to college or whatever, or like going to college for free, but like given like no interest loans by the state for business purposes that are completely like expunged if like your business fails. Like that's it, they're like literally just like shooting tons of free money at like the talent in their country to try to like develop like innovations and businesses and technologies. It's like beautiful. Like it gives me hope for the world that like a state is like just doing this of their own fucking accord, you know, like that's just what they want to do and they do it. Whereas here, pretty much everything, everyone on the street, any random person would want like some pie in the sky idea has absolutely zero fucking chance of getting accomplished. So like to be a professional politics guy in the West right now, and particularly the Anglosphere, what you do is you go, okay, yeah, you want 100%, and maybe we should ask for 50%, but have you thought about asking for 10%, but then lowering that to 5%, and then so you can finally get through 1%, and then we'll just do that for 100 years. Like that's what politics is in the West right now. Like it's like they're like, oh, we have like a 100-year plan to getting Medicare for all. Like that's what you get, and like from someone like Bernie and these guys, and then Bernie will come out here and be like, oh my God, Putin is invading Ukraine, because he read the fucking CIA like bulletin when they came into the Senate to like tell them what to think. It's fucking nuts.
I think that if the West returned to sort of like an ethic of ancestor veneration that you'd find in the Roman Empire, that would help us be more long-term thinkers, because you know that the Chinese are trying to help each other because they have this a sense of generational continuity within families. It's not really ethnocentric, but it is family-centric within their culture.
It's just like that's like the normative thing for most of history. What's really fucking weird is that we have the exact opposite. We have like a cult of iconoclasm against our own ancestors. It's like where it's like it's fucking nuts. Like Mao is literally like, you read Mao, you read like Stalin, Lenin, they literally are that will speak in much higher like praiseworthy terms of people like Abraham Lincoln and George Washington than like anyone self-described progressive or leftist or whatever in the West. Like it's insane. Like it's literally like a cult of like self-abnegation, and like it's kind of just like a humiliation thing. It's like literally like they're just like trying to humiliate themselves. Like we're like, we all need to be humiliated. Like we all need to want less. Like we all need to degrowth. We all need to lower our expectations. It's sort of like the millennials are like the exact opposite of how the boomers present them, where it's like, oh, they're so entitled. And it's like, actually, they all hate themselves and they all want to punish themselves. They're all cruel, especially to themselves. That's like what the millennials are really like.
Everything is real as fuck right now. It's crazy. Everyone is real as fuck right now. Everyone is telling you exactly what the fuck is real right now. There is no more bullshitting around. Everyone is just straight up telling you what it is right now. Whatever someone believes or says today, it will tell you everything about who they are, what they believe, what they think the world should be like. Everything is just surface text right now. This is the duel to the death. This is what clarifies reality. This is where all of the weighty abstractions of liberal, ethical, gamer debate just disappear into the blood and guts of the fucking real. This is real as hell. We have Barstool Sports motherfuckers saying, why are you debunking disinformation like a little Snopesy bitch narc? How about you get behind and spread this badass story to help the Ukrainians in their battle for morale? This is literally insanity. Like, it's fucking bonkers. They're showing videos of Donbass being shelled by Ukrainian NATO troops and Russians crying over this from months ago and saying that it's happening now and that it's Ukrainians that are there. It's literally complete deterritorialization, delusion, fucking nightmare, totalitarian disinfo warfare here. I was alive during fucking Afghanistan, during fucking Iraq. I remember the march to the war, and it was nothing like this. Back then, people were calling shit out. Like, there was way more of a fucking like anti-war ethos. It is gone, ladies and gentlemen. The Occupy Wall Street like psyop to just fucking have complete full spectrum dominance of the memes of memetics is already accomplished. It's done. You can see it happening right now. There's like what? Who is telling the truth right now? Who is saying the opposite? Who is standing against the fucking war? Nobody. Me. And I have fucking Dasha popping into my mentions to call me cringe and how I should convert to Catholicism. Like, so I've stopped posting in support of fucking Putin on this. It's literally insane. Like, do you understand? Like, it's literally full spectrum dominance here. Like, this is the greatest psychological warfare, like, unroll, like, ever in all of human history. We're watching it right fucking now. This is world historical shit. This is fucking real as hell. I'm all capsing right now. But I need some people to fucking volunteer to like calm me down. Well, actually, don't calm me down. I feel great because I know I'm right. I know I'm 300 fucking % right about literally everything I've been talking about for years. For years. It could have been speculative, blah, blah, my crazy nonsense. But no, it's literally, I'm one of the only people who can fucking explain what the fuck is going on right now. It's fucking crazy. Like straight up, I studied Russian. I can't tell you how many fucking calls I'm getting from people. Like, everyone's like, explain what's going on. And I'm taking like 30 minutes at a time to like talk through the entire like Euromaidan crisis, to talk about like the origins of NATO. Like, people are dead. They're like, no, like I was talking to my dad. He was like, no, you're telling me the head of NATO was a fucking like Nazi, that it was like a continuity, that's the Fourth Reich? I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, why don't we ever learn this? I'm sending him articles and stuff. And I'm like, well, why would they ever fucking teach you this? Right? Like, why would they teach you this? Like, when they can just give you the ghosts of Kiev in fucking Marvel movies. Like, that's way better for them. It's way better to have this like theatrical fucking alternate reality. That's what they want to keep you in. It's imposed context. Like, they're literally controlling the contours of your imagination. That's what all of this is about. It's literally like this is the Psy War. This is like, we're in it, folks. This is World War III. It's already, well, I guess it's already been unfolding, but this is when it's like the fucking underbelly of it all is like just fully revealed. There's no subtext. There's no subtext.
Intellectuals are the real retards.
Well, intellectuals, they're the counter-revolutionaries because their job is to like, you know, to like destroy people's like natural intuitions about things, really.
Lenin,
in a funny way, like Pol Pot was kind of based, right?
What's up?
In a funny way, Pol Pot was kind of based.
I mean, yeah, kind of. Like, honestly, kind of. Like, I think about, like, I don't know, like, what do you do if you have, like, you know, you go to, like, you got just, like, what do you do with the Vouches of the fucking world? Like, what do you do with them? They're literally just, like, parasites. They're, they're counterproductive. They just, they delude people. They're like necromancers, you know? They're like fucking black magicians. They're keeping people under, like, a spell and just lying, like, all of the time. And it's like, I don't know. What do you do? What do you do? What do you do with that? What can you do? What can you do?
Does anyone know what the Chapoids are saying about
Nothing. They've
Ukraine?
said nothing. They've literally said nothing about the entire thing. They're waiting until it's over. They will not say a single fucking thing. They won't. None of these leftoids will say a goddamn thing while this is unfolding because they don't know what the end will be and they don't know what the consensus will be and they don't want to alienate or their liberal audiences or
damage their brand profiles, because obviously you're not going to be getting corporate brand deals. You're not going to be on the New York Times if you support Putin. Like, you're going to be blacklisted. So they're being extremely intelligent market actors right now, and brand and like marketers. They are waiting it out. They will stay the course, and then when they just, that's all they do. They just create agreeable pablum. That is their job. Their job is to like put a sheen on agreeable pablum, which means nothing.
Yeah, like the value form of YouTube being like what, $5 per every 1,000 views.
Let not conceit thy settled sense beguile, nor daunted be through envy or disdain. Subject thy dome to her empiring sprite, from whence thy muse and all the world
I only want to
takes
talk about
light.
actionable things. I only want to discuss actionable things. I only want to talk about actionable things. I only want to discuss actionable things. I only want to talk about actionable things. I only want to discuss actionable things. I only want to talk about actionable things. I only want to discuss actionable things. Yeah. Stop dreaming. Stop dreaming. Stop talking about all your dreams. Stop dreaming. Stop dreaming. Stop talking about all your dreams. I only want to discuss actionable things. I only want to talk about actionable things. I only want to discuss actionable things. I only want to talk about actionable things. I only want to discuss actionable things. I only want to talk about actionable things. I only want to discuss actionable things. I only want to talk about actionable things. Do something with your life. Stop being such a sorry sight. Do something with your life. Stop being such a sorry sight. Do something with your life. Stop being such a sorry sight. Do something with your sorry life. Stop being such a sorry sight.
I think that was pretty clear. Well, that's what money is, folks. That's the episode. You just had to listen to this song. They already told you. Money is a demon. Let me get the lyrics up here for you. This little black metal band, right? They say, Mammon est nomen daemonis. Confusio hominis, radix malorum, mas maiorum, pater noster, ora pro nobis, fiat lux, fiat tenebrae, fiat umbrae, fiat ire. Cursed Mammon be, when he with treasures to restless action spurs our fate. Cursed, when for soft indulgent leisures he lays for us the bolster straight. Suckle the teats of Mammon.
So this is in Canto 1, stanza 26. Spencer's writing, who seeing him from far so fierce to prick, his warlike arms about him again embrace, and in the rest his ready spear did stick. Though when as still he saw him towards pace, he gan rencounter him in equal race. They been met, both ready to effrap, when suddenly that warrior gan base his threatened spear, as if some new mishap had him betide, or hidden danger did entrap. And then Guyon cries, Mercy, Sir Knight, and mercy, Lord, for mine offence and heedless hardiment, that had almost committed crime abhorred, and with reproachful shame mine honour shent, whilst cursed still against that badge I bent, the sacred badge of my Redeemer's death, which on your shield is set for ornament. So a couple of things here. At first glance, it might seem like he's just seeing the shield and it has the cross on it, so all is good. But he's actually told by Archimago before that this is the pattern on the knight's shield. He doesn't recognize him by that. Rather, he has recognized him prior in a way that's not registerable to a particular kind of sign that just anybody can note down and classify as such. He recognizes the potency of the sign and associates it with that recognition he's made prior to it. But that recognition happens in that first stanza I read. And really he turns around on the reintroduction of the last introduction of the B rhyme at the end, as the C turns back to B one more time before going to C and C. And there's even, and again, this is the importance of the slantness of poetry. There's the way that a frap, which is, I don't know if it's a neologism of Spencer's or not, but I believe it might be. That's the violent word. That's the word of contest, that they're about to clash into each other. And then a frap rhymes with trap. That is the recognition that this is a trap, that something has gone wrong here and he should not be hurting this person. But that's a recognition that's different from, well, you have this shield and this plume and you say this thing and that thing and you identify with that group and this group, therefore I'm not going to kill you.
Yeah, he's just like, wait, like, why am I doing this? Like, it's just like, he just has like the pause. It's just like a pause, like just a type of doubt, like not in like a bad sense of doubt, but a sense of like, well, I mean, it's good to doubt what the Archimago tells you, right? That's sort of like, it's like, you could imagine this, right, in this sort of, in like where it's like someone like getting ready to like go joust a guy because he has like a red hat on. And you see it from behind and you're like, oh, wow, it's a MAGA hat. Like, I'm going to go punch this guy in the fucking back of the head or whatever. And then they like turn around and it's like a different hat, And it's like, oh, like I very well could have just like done a horrible thing for no reason. Like, you need to have that ability to like step back even from the confirmation of these like symbolic registers, like, because you could always be deceived. And that's like that I guess like we see that like we don't have to teach that lesson again in book 2. So I guess it's sort of shown like how the lessons from book 1 now are being applied like immediately in book 2. Because in book 1 it's all about like that problem of being deceived and like the kind of humility to know that you're capable of being deceived.
That's right.
I was on Twitter. Yikes. Wrong. That's not a good idea. That's hell. But I was reading on Twitter, and I saw the most peculiar thing. I was reading, roughly speaking, a Ron Paul Maoist. Yeah, I know. Yikes. Wrong. He was calling himself Logo Daedalus. Daedalus. Icarus. Archetypes. On the recommendation of my friend, the Orthodox icon carver Jonathan Pageau, who's been following this, what should I say, character for some years, as he told me, but I saw this Logo Daedalus say something so obviously nonsensical that I've decided to take it up with him personally in the swamps of western Massachusetts. I've been on his trail since Jackson, Wyoming, and boy, did that Logo in his bucko hat slam some tankards along the way. Yikes. Wrong. That's hell. And don't get me started on Chicago drivers. Yikes. Wrong. That's hell. Jordan Peterson? Yes, it is I, the Lobster Man. I've got a lobster trap for you right here.
All right, Colin, C, what's your grievance? Air your grievance.
Like a specific one, or like, can it be about somebody?
Okay, I've got a grievance I'm going to air. It's that you're asking me to tell you what the fuck to do when I try to air your grievances. That's my grievance.
Yeah, I'm playing with you. Jesus Christ, I'm about to sue this guy because like literally he owes me about 10 grand for like creative work that I did, and he ignored a message that I sent him. I sent him like a detailed like invoice of everything that I did, and then
yeah, but
didn't reply at all.
The law talks. You can't reason with people. You got to send a lawyer on their ass, right?
Yeah.
You got any more grievances? I want some hot grievances, man. You already know that's just the lawfare. You just got to hire a knight. You got to hire your legal wizard to go cast a spell on him.
How tedious litigation is.
Of course, you have to have a lot of money in order to hire the best wizards, and like they might have incredible wizard protection as well. So that's a tough spot to be in always, And you don't want to like take that loss, but then
it might cost you more than it's worth to just go through with the process, so you kind of just like roll over and take it. But what are you gonna do, man? I don't know. Fucking this society is like that. You literally get the justice you can pay for. That's the system. That's justice. So, maybe you should be richer, and then people wouldn't try to screw you over as much because they'd be more afraid of you. Have you tried that? We could call these and distinguish them as quote unquote accidental poems, or we could call them intended poems. But we could also say that all accidental poems are intended poems from the poet, the great author, the divine hand.
Who is the greatest poet alive today?
Me.
I think Dr. has some grievances.
Yeah, Haas, do you have? I know we share all of our grievances, Haas. We have the same grievances.
I'm just always shocked that I don't know. Maybe you can help me understand it. It's like I'll say some shit on Twitter like Hitler was an anarchist or something, which is like
pretty
it's like clearly counterintuitive, right? It's clearly positioning itself as like, oh, you thought this, but it's like an irony, right? But then people like lose their shit and they're like, oh my god, he doesn't even know that intuitively those things aren't associated. It's like
People who would watch like 100 Days of Sodom where the characters like, we fascists are the true anarchists, and they'd be like, whoa, that's like art, cool, like that makes you think.
Yeah, that's it's like, why is it on Twitter that people are too retarded to like appreciate?
Well, they don't appreciate anything here. Twitter is just designed to like basically flatten out social signaling as much as possible, to have as much like discourse, right? So that we can train like neural like chat bots, because like think like what's the distinction? How the fuck would you tell the difference if all of those quote tweets were bots? You literally can't tell. They could be auto-generated GPT-3 scripts that are trained on like that, like DGG or something.
Someone told me before, I don't know what your thoughts on this. They said that most of these people have a mental disability called autism, where it's like they can't, like everything has to be direct and literal. Is that what it is? Because then there's sometimes people in my community, they're like, no, I have autism and I get it. So it's like,
yeah, what? No, I don't think that's what it is. No, but like I feel like autism in that sense is being used like metaphorically to describe this type of, it's more of like a type of, like bewitchment by the medium itself. Like they're bewitched by the internet, if that makes sense. Or like they're bewitched by the platform. Like, and they actually do express like their bewitchment because like like your statement, most of them, like they're not like treating it as like a logical, like, or as like as a communication of language. They treat it as if like you just like showed your dick like in public or something. They're just like, whoa. Yeah. Like it's not even like rendering as language to them. Like they can't like it's like actually triggering a like collapse of their meaning making ability. Like they look at it and it just hurts their brains.
Yeah, it's almost like it's like it's something that would otherwise produce the ability to think critically, but instead of doing it, they just like blame me that I've like forced them. Instead of like doing the work that's like forced upon them, they're like blaming me for causing them mental pain. It's my fault that they're like
that they're psychotic,
or like that it's my fault that they're like pretty much like stupid. Like, oh, I've never thought of that before. That must mean it's like the most ridiculous thing ever.